Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. A crazy day in the Formula 1 world here with so much going on. Max Verstappen dominating Q3 of qualifying for the Belgian Grand Prix, but will only start P6 after a gearbox penalty we'll explain in the coming minutes. But also Alpine, what's happening over there? Their team principal Otmar getting fired mid-season. You don't see this every day. Very much enjoyed to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you are new as always. Just quickly wanted to mention a couple of the further images for the Mercedes upgrade that we talked about yesterday. It kind of does look like someone's kicked it, right? It looks like they kind of got frustrated with the underperformance, just, kicked it like Max Verstappen did to his tyre in Baku a couple of years ago, and it ended up like this, and apparently it's quicker. Didn't look bad today in qualifying, to be fair. Also a new floor edge, especially compared to the Mercedes last year, was like so far off the pace in qualifying. This year Hamilton had it relatively competitive, but yeah, Verstappen was just different gravy when it got down to Q3. So a slight adjustment here to the floor edge, and also we saw today that Hamilton and Russell running different rear wings. So in Sector 1 and Sector 3, Hamilton was in a better position with a slightly lower downforce version. Russell was generally gaining in Sector 2, where the higher downforce is more critical. And when it comes to racing, straight line speeds, DRS, it's quite useful for Hamilton's perspective to have the lower wing. Now, if it rains, it's a different story. And that's the tricky thing in terms of setting the car up for the weekends. I'm not sure the teams really know, now having gone into Parc Ferme, whether they should have gone for a wet setup, a dry setup, and it kind of felt like during qualifying that Red Bull might have got it a bit wrong, but turns out they probably haven't, and we'll see that here in a second. It's also been a big talking point, right, that this weekend, if the conditions become too dangerous, then the race should be called off, or at least heavily consider what we saw back in 2021. Russell gave his thoughts on it as well and says that we don't want to have a huge incident, so it's on the FIA to make a good call here, and it does make things a little bit interesting given the penalty that Max Verstappen is taking this weekend. Pretty much at the start of the season, you guys remember, his gearbox was having all sorts of issues back in, I think it was towards the end of Bahrain, and then certainly in Saudi Arabia. So he's gone through a couple of gearboxes. He's already on his fifth, and that means a 5-place penalty for replacing that gearbox. Any additional one he takes will then be an additional penalty, I guess, and I suppose that we're only like, not even kind of halfway through the season pretty much. So he's going to have to take more, so there will be more penalties down the line. But if you're Red Bull and Max Verstappen and you need to take a penalty, this is the place to do it. That car is unreal around here. It was last year. Verstappen went from P14 to P1 in a handful of laps, and you'd expect him to do the same thing on Sunday. So this is where they're going to take the penalty. It makes sense to do it here, given Verstappen and this car around this track. And he won't be starting as far back as he did last year, and last year we know what happened there, all the way back from P14. Must be said, though, that if Sunday's race is very wet, or there are issues, it might not be so easy. Like, Verstappen might just not romp through the field as we'd expect. If it's heavily raining, we know that in those conditions, the spray is crazy and can make it very difficult to follow closely. You'd still put your money on Verstappen to win, but maybe there's a red flag due to the conditions, and there's a chance. I think if it's a dry race, Verstappen wins, like, for sure from P6. But if there's other things going on, and there's rain, and there's red flags, and this possibility, then I think it's not exactly guaranteed. And that Red Bull DRS advantage that they apparently now have back on the car this weekend is not relevant when there's no DRS. So, and that is, of course, the case if it's raining. Just another talking point of the day, actually, that this has apparently been approved for next year. So they want to change the format around for the sprint weekends. Currently, we do qualifying for Sunday on a Friday, and then Saturday is sprint shootout and then sprint race. What they want to do instead is FP1 in the morning on Friday, sprint shootout in the afternoon. That sets the grid for Saturday's sprint. You do the sprint in the morning, then you qualify in the afternoon, and then you race on Sunday. Apparently that's been approved by the teams, and I think that's probably, again, marginally better than what we presently have. There also was a lot of talk about tyre blankets lately. The FIA wants to get rid of them, but I think it would cause a bit of a mess. The drivers have been in an uproar, so they've decided not to do that yet, and they'll probably keep pushing this back indefinitely. They always say we're going to ban them, they never really do. Going into FP1 though, given what we're seeing from Russell and the potential bad weather that will likely continue this weekend, it was so varied during the day. the FIA told the teams that FP1 will not be used as a backup qualifying. It will not be a competitive session. They will, if they have to move qualifying around later in the day, they would, to try and ensure they could get some dry running in, or at least some running in which conditions were tolerable enough to actually do qualifying. And they also confirmed, this I thought was pretty interesting, and many were raising the merits of this, that if there was no qualifying that could be done on Friday, they would use the championship order for Sunday's Grand Prix, which is a little bit gimmicky for sure. And there's an argument that says, well, if you're going to just use the championship order to determine the race, like start positions, why not just do reverse championship order? That'd make things really interesting, which it would. Maybe it's not fair, and maybe this is fair, or maybe it's not. So what it would have been is Perez, Alonso, Hamilton, Russell, Sainz, Verstappen P6 with a penalty, Leclerc, Norris, etc., etc. And of course, Ricciardo would be P20, so he wouldn't be so happy given that he's got no points on the board. Didn't really make too much difference to Ricciardo this anyway. McLaren would be hard done by in this circumstance. Alonso would benefit greatly. Pretty interesting. And it looked like it might go this way, given that these were the conditions during FP1 and there was not much going on. Like barely any driving was done. We can see the spray and the conditions. Logan Sargent smacked it in the wall as well, going into Le Com. I think, I don't know, for some reason his car just didn't want to stop. I don't really think it was his fault, to be honest. But anyway, that was a bit of an incident that they had. But before we get into qualifying itself, we've got to discuss all this mess at Alpine. It's actually incredible how Alonso and Piastri especially have dodged a massive bullet here. So Pat Fry just has joined Williams as their CTO. He was formerly at Alpine until about a week ago. And there's plenty of other people getting binned off by Alpine as well. Mainly their top guy, Otmar Szafneuer, right? He said just about 3 days ago that he trusts that after Lauren Rossi was kicked out as like the CEO or whatever, they brought a new guy in. He says that he's confident that Alpine will give him time to finish the 100 race plan to start winning races. 3 days later, the rumours start to emerge that both Alain Permain, who's been with the team for like 34 years, and Otmar himself will be dismissed. They're getting fired, basically, or it's by mutual agreement or whatever, right? And they definitely want to go, and they're totally not being forced out. But, I mean, this is madness. Like, this team is the French Ferrari, potentially the French Ferrari on steroids, to be honest, because what is going on there? It's actually unbelievable. And just looking at the last several months, don't know what's next for Otmar and, of course, Alain Permain as well, a veteran of this team. But look at the last 18 months. They fired, like, pretty much either fired or has left, like, everyone that's involved with their team on a top level has gone. And even, you know, when Otmar joined and now he's gone again, has been fired. And even in that last 18-month period as well, they've lost one of the hottest prospects on the grid in Oscar Piastri, and they've lost a two-time world champion in Fernando Alonso, and Pat Fry's gone. It's an absolute mess. It's incredible how badly that team is run and probably will continue to be run. But who knows? They're going for a big reset, new CEO, new team principal, and the new team principal is rumoured to be Mattia Binotto. There's lots of talk lately that Binotto is the man that is being heavily linked, and it will only be a matter of time, apparently, until Mattia Binotto will go from Ferrari to, as I've described them, the French Ferrari here at Alpine, with some of the questionable decisions they make behind the scenes, shall we say, and the politics that seem to be in play. So is this justified by Alpine? They are, I think they're P6 in the championship, are they not right now? And they actually lost Pat Fry to Williams, who are the team, I think, right behind them. So it's a mess. They need to turn things around, and at least they're realising that they need wholesale changes. Not saying Otmar, I don't think, really did anything wrong, to be honest. I mean, I think he inherited an absolute mess. I'm not sure he's done a phenomenal job with the mess that he inherited, but nonetheless, I think that you can't put all the blame on him. But let's talk qualifying then, because it was really interesting. It was, well, drying up. It was Inters the first section, then into Q2, went to slicks towards the end, and it was a bit suspect whether it was even going to go to slicks, and because a few of the laps weren't that quick, and then it was clear that the softs were the way to go. Ricciardo would have got into Q2, but he got a lap time deleted going up Radion, so he was out P19. Hulkenberg, despite looking kind of quick, has had a bit of an issue. Magnussen also might get demoted because of a impeding incident with Charles Leclerc, which is currently getting reviewed. But this was a crazy Q2, and it was confusing in a way because Hamilton was on his pretty much only attempt to actually set a competitive lap with about a minute 15 on the clock, and I thought that's pretty early. Like, there will be cars coming over the line a minute later than Hamilton that should have significantly better track conditions. So Hamilton did a decent lap here, was 8/10 behind Piastri in the end, who is an absolute monster in the middle sector the entire day. Super impressive stuff. Norris even himself couldn't match Piastri's pace today. Then Then the two Ferraris were looking very good, and the Red Bulls didn't seem to be that quick. Perez wasn't that fast. Verstappen was very lucky, you could say, to even get into Q3. He was P10, and if it wasn't for Ocon bidding it in the wall, like Ocon very plausibly here, if he actually did a proper lap towards the end and didn't have to go into the pits because he broke his front wing, could have potentially knocked out Verstappen. I actually thought Gasly was going to knock out Verstappen because Gasly was like the last across the line and had the best track conditions, so I thought he was going to be able to, but Verstappen just didn't have quite the confidence in the car in those conditions and was very animated on the radio actually to his, Jean-Pierre Lambiase, his engineer, saying that I should have pushed 2 laps in a row like I said, and GP's like, well look, you're through Max, don't sweat it. I don't care, mate. I'm through in P10, or if I'm through in P10, it's just bad execution for the team. And then he's like, well, what do you want us to do? If you do 2 push laps in a row, you're going to have no energy in your battery left. How would that have gone down? But tell me what you want to do in Q3, and we'll do it. Let me know. Do the engineering for me, Max. So, this is one of the first times that I've really seen GP clap back to Max in this way. This is the type of relationship that they have. But, I thought it was kind of incredible that Max was saying things like this after scraping into Q3, but getting into Q3 on 7 victories in a row. But obviously he wants to break the record, right, from Sebastian Vettel. That was set in 2013 with 9 race victories in a row. Verstappen's on 7. If he wins here, in Zandvoort and in Monza, he will break that record. But I thought that was kind of incredible, to be honest. And then Q3 was pretty interesting because it was definitely dry at this point. The soft tyres were 100% the way to go, and it looked a little bit suspect as to whether all the cars would get round in time. Russell eventually gets over the line with 2 seconds, I think, on the clock remaining, so it was pretty touch and go for these guys. I think it was Alonso possibly that was looking like he was holding everyone up coming out of the pit lane, but they all get away with it in the ends. But Max Verstappen just put in a phenomenal lap. I thought it's the classic thing, right? You go into Q3 and you're like, all right, it's been a great qualifying so far, but here comes Max to drop 5 tenths in everybody's head, and he's done it again, but it wasn't 5 tenths, it was 8 tenths, and just an incredible lap. Because I was wondering, like, is the Red Bull not set up so well this weekend? Have they set it up for a wet race, a dry race, and qualifying isn't really their focus? And it's probably not their focus, but Max just put together a phenomenal lap. Now look, he does have the 5-place penalty. He will start from down in P6, and it's Charles Leclerc that will be taking pole position. Now Hamilton was on the radio, like, because Hamilton did great in qualifying today. Like, he was 9 tenths off Verstappen, but he was like a 10th off pole. So the Mercedes compared to the other cars are looking pretty good, especially with the new upgrades and relative to the Mercedes being absolutely nowhere at this track last season. But still, like 9 tenths, Hamilton was like, where's that time? Middle sector, and probably just pushing the absolute limits in the middle sector, which is what Max was doing. But also some high downforce, right? Because Verstappen's definitely running a higher downforce wing, I think, than Hamilton is. And Perez as well, 9 tenths off Max, right? So the Red Bull's very quick. Max is obviously very quick in it. And Perez is not really, like, in tricky conditions like that, Perez isn't really the best at actually finding the limits, whereas Max is. So, I mean, but still 9 tenths to Verstappen, like, that's kind of unacceptable if you're Perez, you know what I mean, in the same car. But still, Piastri and Norris in the ends, the McLarens just weren't quite there, but still, Piastri 3 tenths over Norris. Hamilton had like another 7 tenths on his teammate in Russell, and I would have loved to see Russell versus Verstappen down into turn 1 tomorrow, but we're not going to get it because Max is going to be P6, Russell's down in P8. But that means the front row is going to be Leclerc, Perez, Hamilton, and I said tomorrow, I think, but what I mean is Sunday, because tomorrow in the sprint day, it's going to be a different starting order because, well, you would think at least, unless things go crazy, based on another qualifying session for the sprint shootout. There are a couple of investigations ongoing, one of them between Hamilton and Russell. I don't really think there was much in it, and I'm not even sure Hamilton really impeded Russell at all anyway. But Hamilton came up, and I think he was trying to get out the way of Russell because he thought Russell was doing a fast lap. Neither of them were doing a fast lap, I don't think. So Hamilton rejoins with Russell next to him, and I didn't really think there was much in it. And their teammate, I don't think the stewards will really care for this one. The one that is a bigger deal, though, is Magnussen on Leclerc, who pretty much blatantly blocked him as far as I'm concerned. So there might be a penalty coming his way. But very much enjoyed to hear your thoughts on all this madness today in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.